What's up, my diggers? I'm back with another video. I was not able to get a video up yesterday. My apologies for that. I've got some family visiting from out of town, and it's a little awkward to start filming a video talking about comic books in the dining room while they're here. So I just wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about current comic books and why I think they're going to end up being some of the rarest comic books in the history of the medium. So a lot of people are talking about current sales figures. Current sales are very, very low. I think compared to last year, there was just an article where sales are like down 25% across the board. And what does this mean? Well, it means much smaller print runs. Hopefully the noise isn't too bad. I've just got the phone on my lap and I'm driving. I'm actually headed to the comic book store to pick up Eternals #1, the new True Believer reprint of it. Really excited for that because I don't have that issue. So what does it mean that sales are down? Well, it means they're printing less comics. Now, you know, when you go into any bargain bin, you tend to see a lot of comics from the 90s, and that's because print runs were at an all-time high. I think it was either X-Men or X-Force that sold like 1 million copies. It was like the first comic ever to sell 1 million copies. And so you see those a lot because it reflects that. And I mean, older comic books, it used to be like, oh man, 100,000 was like the minimum. Like you had to sell 100,000 if you wanted to stay in print. A couple of years ago when the New 52, well, Jesus, almost better part of a decade ago, when the New 52 came out, a lot of people, like basically it was a hard 30,000. If you were selling less than 30,000, your book was axed. So you think about it, okay. So the average comic has, you know, Batman at New 52 was selling like 90,000. The lowest selling comic books were selling less than 30. So let's average that and say that the average comic was selling about 50,000. You compare that, that is half as many comic books in circulation compared to the 80s and 90s. And these are just all off the hip. But what I'm trying to convey here is that there are less copies of current comic books in circulation. So, you know, in 2011, the New 52 era, we were printing about 50,000 of an average comic. An average comic at Marvel right now, you know, we cut out, was it 25%? So we're looking at like between 30 and 40,000. Diversity in Comic Books and Captain Cummings have talked about how, I don't even know what it is, like 30% of Marvel's catalog is selling under 20,000. Yeah, and the thing is, realistically, none of those books are going to be worth anything. They're just not. I'm going to do another video how none of your comic books will ever be worth anything. But value and rarity are two different things. You know, if you watch Pawn Stars, you hear this a lot. Rare doesn't always mean valuable. For example, I had chased down a copy of Chainsaw Vigilante, which was a spin-off series from The Tick. I chased that book down for like a decade and could never find it. And then sure enough, I ran across it in a Dollar Tree in one of those like bags of comic books they have there. So just because it was rare didn't mean it was actually worth anything. So you have current comic books printing at like 20,000, 30,000 on average. They're going to be harder to find. In 10 years' time, I mean, I'm even having trouble where I'll go to a dollar bin or bargain basements or what have you, and it's the same stuff that I saw when I started collecting comic books in the late 90s. You know, we're still looking at comic books from the 80s, comic books from the 90s, very strongly on display. Finding comic books from like the early 2000s when sales started going down and up to modern day is becoming rare. Now, there is a bit of a weird cognitive dissonance that happens. Recent comic books, like comic books within the last 5 years, you will find. And that's because the secondary market, people are going to start picking this stuff up. You know, there's a lot of books I wouldn't pick up at cover price, but I see it for $1 and I'll reconsider. So there's kind of a time decay here where you've got copies of modern comic books in circulation that no one has bought yet, and you'll find those in the bargain bins. But I mean, honestly, if you did an audit, if you know, I've got a store in town that by me that has like just rows and rows of dollar books. If I did an audit of the whole thing, I don't think comic books from the 2000s and 2010s would what are we calling that? 2010s. Tell me in the comments below, what are we calling is it the 20-aughts? I heard that once. I don't think you're gonna have a high percentage of comics from that era, unless you're looking at comic books like in the last 5 years, the ones that haven't quite made it to the bargain circulation yet, the secondary market. So what does this mean? What does this mean within comic collecting? Well, one of the problems is, if you have a character you really care about, like for instance, I care about Moon Knight. I care about Moon Knight a lot. I made sure I get every one of his new issues. I'm on my way right now to go pick up the Jack Kirby Sandman special in addition to Eternals. You know, I care about these, so I'm making sure I get them. I don't have a pull list anymore because I don't really like the comic shop in my town that actually does pull lists. So, but I'm headed there now, still spending my money there. So you have to, you know, it's good on comic book end, but it's bad in overall end because they're cutting out the secondary market and making it so it's harder to get into this stuff. There's less copies in circulation, which means less copies are going to be in bargain bins, and bargain bins are where a majority of young people are going to start collecting comic books. That's where I started, that's where many of my friends started. So, you know, no kid, after they get out of seeing Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and they go to, you know, the thrift store, or if they're lucky, a comic shop, and they go into the bargain bins, no kid's going to want a copy of X-Force. You know, they aren't. I mean, maybe after Deadpool 2 comes out and Cable's popular, but it's besides the point. There's no comic books in those bins that are going to attract kids because things aren't as familiar, you know. We've got almost 3 decades between now and when the comic books were at their most well, not most popular. I mean, you go back to like Action Comics #1, that thing's selling 500,000 the first day. But my point is still valid. We have a major overabundance of comic books from this very specific era that aren't going to relate to comic books for people coming out of the movies, watching the cartoons, buying the toys, and it's gonna be harder to find this stuff. So, you know, I don't really want to support Marvel Comics right now, just because they're letting their politics lead them too much, and they're missing out on a quality product. But at the same time, I know in 5 years, I'm gonna have trouble finding like the Moon Knight comic from Marvel Now, or all new Marvel Now, the Warren Ellis issues. Those are gonna be hard to find. And it's not because they're going to be worth a lot, it's just going to be that there's less of them in circulation. I'm going to have a much easier time finding Moon Knight #1 from the 70s than I will to find Moon Knight #1 from frickin' 2013. It's just math. So, anyway, I guess I'm kind of rambling at this point, but my point is, there are less comic books being printed now. So if you're collecting a certain character, if you want to have an entire run of a certain character or a certain team or a certain writer, you have to buy it ASAP, and unfortunately you're gonna have to pay cover price. You can roll the dice on those bargain bin issues, and you'll probably do pretty well for about 5 years, and then you'll start seeing it come back at you, and you're gonna have trouble finding certain issues, and you're gonna see the prices start going up, or just not be able to find them at all. That's more realistic. I got plenty of comic books that I'm still trying to find that aren't worth anything. It's super frustrating. So just go out and buy your comics. You know, start a pull list. Even if you're not caught up in the story, like I always say, a good comic book, you can pick up any issue. And if you care about the character enough, or if you care about the writer or the artist, you're gonna be able to fill in the dots. Wikipedia, Comic Vine, Wikia. You know, they're all out there. There are resources, so don't be afraid. You know, pick up any comic. So just always remember it. Rarity does not equate value. So don't start paying crazy amounts for Miss Marvel #3 because you just can't find it anywhere. Also, there's the side of it. I might do a larger video about this, but trade paperbacks are more prominent than ever. So you can always swoop them up that way if you're okay with that. Not everyone's okay with having a mix of issues and trade paperbacks or all trade paperbacks. So, all right, so that's my video. I just wanted to talk about that. It's an interesting thing to note, especially with people talking about where sales numbers are right now. And that's my thoughts on the topic. So in the meantime, go read a comic. Any comic.